All right, welcome to the lab number 1 results video. So by now, most if not all of you have gone to the link that was on Moodle and entered your data. And now I am going to do the statistical analysis to find out what happened in our replication of the Rubick and Zhuang parking lot study. So here we have our data set. Down here, if I go to the variable view, you can see the different variables we have. The ones we're most interested in are going to be the time, whether or not there's a car waiting or not waiting, and we're going to look at the gender of the driver today. So if we think back to our original hypothesis, we predicted that people would take longer to pull out of a parking spot when someone was waiting compared to when no one was waiting for the spot. So in that hypothesis, we have two conditions, waiting versus not waiting, and we have a continuous dependent variable, the amount of time it took someone to leave the spot. So when we have that kind of scenario, a dichotomous independent variable, two categories, dichotomous, and a continuous outcome variable, then the appropriate statistical test, the tool that will help us to analyze that data, will be the independent samples t-test. And an independent samples t-test asks the question, is the average of group 1 different from the average of group 2? Or in other words, is the average amount of time that someone is the average amount of time that someone took to pull out of a parking spot when someone is waiting significantly different from the average amount of time it took someone to pull out of a parking spot when no one was waiting? So that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to reset this. So I'm going to move time over here to the test variable. This is my dependent variable. I'm going to move waiting over here to the independent variable, grouping variable. Now notice it has question marks here because I need to tell it how am I coding my waiting. Because notice when you look in the sheet here, my data is 1 for waiting, 2 for no one waiting. Right? I don't actually type out waiting or no waiting. So I'm just going to tell it group 1 is 1, group 2 is 2. And then I'm going to click continue. And then I'm going to click OK. And here's my output. So the thing that we're going to be interested in this output, first we're going to look up here at the group statistics box. So we can see that we have 341 observations when someone was waiting for the spot and 337 observations when no one is waiting. And the reason why these are such large numbers is that I've actually been keeping sort of a running data set of these for many sections of experimental. So this includes your data, but also data from other classes. Now, when we look at the mean, this is the average amount of time in seconds that it took people to pull out of the parking spot. So for when people are waiting for the spot, it took them on average 86.08 seconds to leave the parking spot. And when there was no one waiting, it took them an average of 55.9 seconds. So that's a difference, mean difference over here, of about 30 seconds. So it took people 30 seconds longer on average to leave that spot when someone was waiting. And the standard deviation and the amount of variability is over here. Notice actually there's more variability as well. The standard deviation is larger when someone is waiting. Now we want to know, is this significant? Is this a significant difference between these two average amounts of time? So the things we're going to look at, we're going to ignore Levine's test, okay? Completely ignore. You can just put a big X through that box. We're going to look here at this first line, T, degrees of freedom, significance. The T is 5.1, the degrees of freedom is 6.76, and this is a significant result. P is less than 0.001. So the criteria we use for evaluating probabilities is P is less than 0.05. So this number 000, it's actually not 0, it's just a really tiny decimal somewhere 4 or 5 decimals off. So we say this is significant, P is less than 0.001. So in plain English, we can say, yes, indeed, we support our hypothesis. People did take significantly longer to pull out of a parking spot when someone is waiting compared to when no one is waiting. Now, in my afternoon section of this class, they also asked a question about gender. They wanted to know, they thought, it seemed like when we were out there that women seemed to take a lot longer to pull out of a parking spot compared to men. So we can ask that question because we have that data. do women take significantly longer to pull out of a parking spot compared to men? So again, we're going to go to Analyze, we're going to go to Compare Means, and we're going to go to Independent Samples t-test. Instead of having our grouping variable being weighting, we're going to change this grouping variable to be gender. We're going to give it the same codes. So 1 for male, 2 for females. And time is still our dependent variable. We're going to click OK. When we scroll down, again, the first place we're going to look is the means. So we have 312 males, 368 females. 64.6 seconds is how long it took the males to pull out overall. So this is whether or not someone was waiting, just for men in general, 64 seconds. For women, 76 seconds. And that is about an 11.6 second difference. When we look down here at the significance, T, degrees of freedom, significance, our P is equal to 0.051, right? So our cutoff for statistical significance is 0.050. So technically speaking, this is not statistically significant because 51 is greater than 50. 0.051 is greater than 0.050. But it is so close, we would probably say this is marginally significant. There's a marginally significant effect. Women did, in fact, seem to take longer to pull out of a parking spot when someone was waiting compared to when, I'm sorry, women did, in fact, take longer to pull out of a parking spot compared to men. Okay. So these are the two results that we are going to report for our lab that is going to be due on the due date listed on the syllabus. You will write up these results for the results section of the lab. And to get a template for how to do that, you're going to want to look back at the lecture notes from last week. So if you recall last week, we went over a real example of some data that I did looking at prejudice at DePaul University. And at the end of those lecture notes, I gave some SPSS output and an example results paragraph. And that is the template that you're going to want to use. Also, there are links on Moodle that give you help interpreting output and help writing up results. So just make sure that you consult with my notes and consult with those links on Moodle to write up the results. I will post a copy of these results, what you see here, onto Moodle. It will be in a PDF form, so you should be able to open it from any computer. So as always, let me know if you have questions.